everyone. I'm here with Darlene Spracklin-Reid, who is a lecturer in the Faculty of Engineering at Memorial, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her career. I'm going to hand it right to her. If you would please tell me about yourself, Darlene.
Sure. I'm an engineer. I graduated from engineering school here in St. John's, Newfoundland, back in the 90s. And I went to work as a construction manager. And I did that for a number of years before I ended up going into engineering education. So I was actually a little torn at the start of my career, whether I wanted to be an engineer or a teacher of math and science kind of stuff. And now I get to do both. So I'm pretty happy in my career path because I get to be an engineer and still work on lots of projects, but I also get to help other young people and young women become engineers too. I live here in St. John's. I've been married for a number of years now, and I've got a couple of teenage kids and a whole house full of various animals, cats, dogs, geckos. The list goes on. So that is my life, I guess, here. I am also a proud Rotarian, so a member of other parts of my community groups, I guess.
Perfect. And can you start by kind of describing a little bit of your career and what, I guess, even your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. In the beginning of my career, I worked, as I said, in the construction industry. And so that was a big passion of mine. I went to work initially at building these offshore oil rigs that you see off the coast of Newfoundland, Labrador. So that was one of the places I started. Then I moved on to work on other large civil projects across Canada. Back in the day, big, huge movie theaters were a thing. And we went building those, hospitals, schools. I really enjoyed my work as a construction manager. Then when my children were young, I found myself off on maternity leave, and I didn't actually really understand that kids were a lot of work. So I thought, what can I do on maternity leave? I didn't know anything about babies at that point. So I went and did an education degree because I had always kind of wanted to think about what would it look like to combine engineering and education. And I'm very glad that I did. It was a very busy time, but when I graduated from that, I started teaching in the post-secondary institutions. Now I find myself at Memorial University, where I get to teach students, but also engineering school is more than just classes. It's projects and work terms and getting involved in community things. And so I enjoy my time in the classroom. I love teaching and I love my students, but I love working on those kinds of projects too and providing my students opportunities to get themselves embedded in community stuff. And I love it. I cry every year at graduation because I'm just so proud of how far they have come from the day that I teach a lot of first year classes. And so I see everybody move all the way up through the program and graduate. So on those days, on convocation days, I know how much I love my job and how rewarding it is, because you can have an impact in the community as an engineer, but you can also have a big impact if you create a bunch of engineers who love having impact.
That sounds awesome. Are these kind of the first career related positions the students have?
For our students who do some of the community work that they're getting embedded in, it's their first, many of them, it's their first taste of being in the community and working on something engineering related. So for many of them, it actually helps bridge that gap between not having any engineering experience and trying to market themselves for engineering work terms. Many of them will end up doing these community-based ones that we have developed at the university. And it's really interesting for them to see that they're, bright young people with really great technical problem-solving skills. And when you think about that, a lot of traditional industries that are engineering related obviously want to hire those kind of people, but there are a lot of community groups out there that have problems that they need to solve as well. And our students get to go in there and help them. So we've worked with schools, mentoring students with their robotics teams. We've had students who are embedded with the food bank doing a realignment of how the physical space is designed, and actually did the design. And then that design was completed by some other volunteers, actually implemented it. We've had a number of students who have worked with NL Eats, which is working on a way to distribute food around the province in an effective way. So they're all computer engineers who are coming up with algorithms of how we can really effectively distribute food into the community, which is just so amazing. We have students working with food security projects with O'Brien's Farm, and the list goes on.
That is so cool. Do you have kind of a high point you would choose from your career to date? What would the high point look like?
It's funny. I kind of describe, a friend and I were talking about our careers in engineering actually a couple of days ago, and there's so many high points along the way. You know, when you're in the middle of a high point, you really think that this is the high point. But there's been so many good ones along the way. I know when I was in my early career, working in construction, and something that I designed got built. And I remember taking my parents to go see a bridge that I designed the foundations for. And I was just so happy to do that. And my parents were so proud. I made them all get out of the car and look around, just like, I did that. That road wouldn't be there without the work that I did. And that was a real high point for me early on, being able to look at something that went from paper to completion, and that I had a big role. I loved that. When I had a very small role in a big, huge team that built the first gravity-based structure that went out to the Grand Banks. And the day that floated and they towed it out, that was a highlight of all of it. I can still remember it like it was yesterday, all of us engineers standing there and watching this, waiting for this big concrete structure to float. And when it did, there was cheers all around and quite happy. And now in my career that I'm in now, when I see my students achieving, and I see that some of your other mentors are my former students, that makes me so proud, and that I feel we've accomplished so much, and that they're out there working in successful jobs, but also continuing to give back to the community. And what we've been able to do with changing the way that engineers are educated is another thing that I feel is a highlight of my career. I've really been involved in engineering education for a long time, and math and science is super important, but community is important too, because engineers, what we do at the very crux of what we do as engineers is protect the public and the environment. It's in an oath that we swear to. It's part of our profession. It's what we must do. And I firmly believe that in order for an engineer to be able to really care and feel that, they need to be embedded in community. They need to represent the communities they come from. So we have to be more diverse as a profession. So if we're working if a bunch of engineers are working in the community, they should look like that community that they're serving. And so there have been a lot of changes along the way, and I've been part of some of those changes, and that makes me really proud.
That's awesome. I've got goosebumps thinking about that structure floating. That's amazing. I hadn't heard about the oath. Is that something tied to I know a lot of engineers wear a ring. Is that connected?
It is actually, yep. I have my ring on right here. And so when engineers graduate here in Canada, we get an iron ring. And the iron ring is to remind us of our responsibility to the public. It was based upon a bridge failure in Quebec many, many years ago, over 100 years ago. But it's to remind us of our responsibility. So when we look at that iron ring on our finger, that we remember that we owe a duty of protection to the public. And in fact, my oath, I think, is behind me. So I keep it nearby. And all engineers get this one. And we swear to protect the public, and we are regulated by a body here called the Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Newfoundland and Labrador. And one of the things about being an engineer is it's quite a privilege, because where a lot of jobs and professions are regulated by, say, the government or some external body, engineers have been entrusted with that responsibility ourselves. So we regulate what it takes to become an engineer, who can practice as an engineer, and under what circumstances. And engineers, again, we get to have these really exciting, rewarding careers, but with that comes this responsibility as well. But that's what that's what makes it such a privilege and an honor to be an engineer. We're a helping profession. And I think that's one of the things that's most misunderstood about engineering. When we think about, I really want to do something that will help the world be a better place, or change the world, or overcome some challenges, and make things better for people, there's lots of great careers to do that in, but sometimes we don't realize that engineering is a perfect career choice for somebody who feels like that. We can have such massive impact. In fact, if we look at the grand challenges, if you Google grand challenges for the 21st century, some of these challenges, if you go through them, all about a lot of them about health and welfare and environmental challenges and climate change, and all of those things have a role for engineers. And in fact, we should and must be, I think, at the table helping to try to overcome those things.
Absolutely. And I've referenced before for our members the Millennium Development Goals as kind of ideas of challenges that they might want to think about working on. And there's just so many options for, once you pick your challenge, how you're going to work on that challenge. But you're right, engineering could fit into any one of them so easily. I think we have this platform we use called Spark, that they do challenge cards. So I'm just mentioning this here, there now for any girls that are watching. I'll put it in the description as well if you want to go through the challenges that you want to work on, and then we can think about how an engineer could work on those challenges as well. So I'll put that there, and I'll also put in the description, I'm sure I'll be able to find the oath, just if any of the girls want to read through an engineer's oath, I'll add that to the description of this video as well. And also, we have, this is part of Summer Summit. You might be watching this later on, but I'm going to throw out there now a gamification code. So we're doing some prizes throughout. So I'm going to use your sign behind you that says Civil Engineer Drive as a gamification code. So no spaces, but if you're watching this during the month of July, then add that one in for your gamification. And we'll get back to talking with you again, Darlene. Sorry for that interlude there. I kind of went off. But for all of those sorts of, I mean, you have such a responsibility. You must have to do some continuous training or professional development to keep up to standard.
We do. In fact, it's part of what our group, the Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Newfoundland and Labrador, which we call PEG-NL, they have a program where we do a certain number of professional development hours every year, and they fall into various categories. So you earn professional development credits, and you need to keep up with those credits in order to maintain your license to practice as an engineer. We call our PEng, it's a professional engineering designation. And they involve things like attending seminars and training courses, or they could involve contributing to knowledge yourself. So some of my colleagues at the university are doing very cutting edge research, and that counts towards their professional development. It could be doing work with a volunteer group where you use your engineering skills. All of those things add up, and actually going to work every day and working in your job earns you some credits. And so all of those things add up to our professional development requirements. And most provinces across Canada require that from their engineers. Other professions do too. Accountants, lawyers, doctors, all those require similar types of professional development.
Yeah, I feel like that's a misunderstanding, or at least I never knew about it when I was in the K-12 system, that, I thought education just ended at some point, but
learning never stops. Yeah.
Learning never stops. It's not something to be afraid of. These things are quite interesting once you're already an expert in your field. You're just expanding your knowledge.
Absolutely. And none of these professional development requirements are onerous. Like, they're things that are often facilitated by PEG-NL, or they're easily acquired as you're doing your day-to-day work. We're always learning. And in fact, we're teaching our students now in engineering school about the fourth industrial revolution, right? That's a fun topic to Google as well. But as we move into the future, things are, and basically the hallmark of that is how fast things are changing. So we're educating young people right now for a world that'll be maybe when they finish post-secondary, several years out. And the world will look a lot different by then. As you look back 5, 10 years, you think about how much things have changed and how quickly they've changed. So now we're educating people really to have the skills, not on a particular, it's not as much about content, about learning a bunch of knowledge that you put in your head and just draw on like a library, because we have and all kinds of information out there that we can access, but it's about learning how to be a problem solver and how to be creative. And it's those skills that take you into the future no matter what changes. So you get educated in that particular way of how to design strategies and how to work with clients and really understand what the problem that you're trying to solve is, and then figuring out ways to analyze the data you collect, and all those kinds of things are just fundamental skills that you take with you no matter how the world changes. And it's one of the things that I think that's so much fun about engineering school is getting to tackle those kinds of problems. And and then that makes for engineers that are able to practice 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. When I graduated from engineering school, it was 1995, which is probably going to sound pretty long ago to a lot of your audience. And the internet was just being born, and computers were just beginning to become mainstream. So none of those things were part of my fundamental education, but I didn't need that. I could learn that because in engineering school, I learned how to learn. And so I'm not afraid of the future or things that I need to learn as they come. One of the things that you graduate with is those skills to tackle what comes your way.
Awesome. So, I mean, the internet was a major event back then, but are you looking forward to any major events coming up, or what kind of advancement in engineering in general are you hoping to witness?
I am really excited about how far safety has come. I know that this might be probably a boring topic, I guess, I don't know, but when I started out as a young engineer, it was just becoming this thing where safety was becoming something that we were talking about more and trying to integrate more. And now when I see young engineers graduating, it's not even it's so embedded in them that it's like it was never something that had to develop or grow. They already have it from the get-go. And why I'm saying that I'm excited about the future is that there's so much coming that's going to make things safer and better for humanity. I know people are sometimes a little nervous about AI, so artificial intelligence and things like that. I am so excited for what that will bring to the world of transportation. And if we think about the number of lives that will be saved when we have autonomous vehicles, I think is pretty darn cool. And I think if we look back, we'll think, how did we ever get by without this? How did we ever accept that it wasn't as safe? And I really do think that AI is going to make transportation so much safer. I'm really pumped about electric vehicles because it's just starting. They've been around a long time, but it's just starting to, when I'm having conversations with people saying, did you see the new F-150 coming out as the electric vehicle? I'm going to get that. Like people who are not like nervous about it, or maybe I will, or kind of people who are just kind of on the fringe and really super into electrification. It's becoming mainstream now. And what that will do for our climate and therefore health and the safety of the population, I just think AI and electric vehicles, can't wait to see how that all plays out.
It's awesome. You're giving me goosebumps all the time. You're so fun to talk with.
Because engineering is awesome. It's so much fun to talk about engineering.
I feel like we could carry this conversation on and on, but I think we'll start to wrap up. Is there any advice that you'd kind of give to these youth just starting out on they're in junior high and high school? So what kind of advice would you have for them?
I've thought about this a lot over the years, and I've thought about, what it is that prevents people sometimes from choosing engineering. You may hear some strange noises going on. My dog is dreaming. So he's asleep here at my feet and he's having a dream. So he's chasing bunnies and something. So anyway, when I was in high school, I did not know what I wanted to be. And so I would advise you, if you know that you want to go into a STEM field, do take the sciences and the maths. But if you don't take every single course, so let's say I was in grade 12 and I decided I wanted to be an engineer, and I had taken biology and geology. So I didn't take chemistry and physics, but there was still a path for me. I just had to pick up a couple extra courses when I got to the university. And I actually graduated in the same amount of time as all the people that had taken the right choices. So I'm gonna say the door is never closed. There's always a path forward. So just because you're like, oh, I didn't take physics this year, that doesn't matter. We can sort that out at the university, right? We have a path. So it may not be the exact same path as somebody else, but it's never too late to change your mind and switch the path that you're on to a STEM field for sure. And I would also say that traditionally we all feel, I think, a little doubt in ourselves and whether or not we can do it. Even to the we have clear evidence in front of us that we're quite capable. We still think, oh, maybe I'm not that good at math. I just got lucky, or that kind of thinking. But if you can do it, if you're doing well in math, you're doing well in math because you have the skills to do well. If you're not doing well in math, sometimes it's just because you missed a tiny little detail somewhere along the way. And when you figure out what that is, so you get a little help from a friend or a tutor or a teacher at school, and you fill in that little gap of the thing that's making math hard for you, and it'll go on like a light bulb. Because I truly believe everyone can do math. It's just a matter of maybe somewhere along the way, someone got a little intimidated or fearful of it. But when we can deal with that, I think then the sky's the limit, and you'll see that it's actually a really fun subject and something that you can get a lot of satisfaction from conquering and using it as a toolkit then when you go on to engineering school or whatever you want to do. I think you can tell I love engineering.
Yes, I think you do. You might just. Wonderful. So with all of that said, is there anything that you wanted to cover that we haven't really touched on before I let you go back to your puppy dog?
I just want to say that engineering has brought me a lot of the things I think that are good in my life has come from being an engineer. So I get a lot of personal satisfaction from having a career choice that isn't just a job. It's a passion of mine that you can see, I think. I get to do a lot of things that help other people. And that for me was really important in my career. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but for me, I really wanted something that made a difference. When I could look back on my career, I could feel like, yeah, I made the world somewhat of a better place by doing what I did for a living. I also wanted a job where I could be financially independent, where I didn't have to rely on anybody else to be able to achieve the things I wanted to do in life, like travel and have a nice home. And I love cars and vehicles, and I love that too. So I really wanted to be able to do those things. And I knew that if a career in engineering would allow me the independence to be able to do that and build a life for myself. And I even met my husband in engineering school, so I guess I got him along the way too. And we got a lovely family and all of those things. And a lot of it just came out of that choice that I made to do engineering. There are a lot of other great paths out there in STEM too, but I'm sure you've got equally passionate mentors from those fields. But I will say that engineering, it's not challenging. It is. It has its challenges and it has its ups and downs. But overall, I wouldn't change a thing about it because it's brought me so many good things in my life.
That's such a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Darlene, for speaking with us today. And I will put your profile in the description below if anyone wants to read more about Darlene's experience. And have a great afternoon, everyone.